Welcome to Let's Talk About It. Broadcasting live from North Nashville, Tennessee. North Nashville spans from Metro Center down to the border of Bicentennial Mall, including the neighborhoods of Bordeaux, Buena Vista, Parkwood Estates, Germantown, Haynes Manor, Jefferson Street, Fisk Park, Cumberland Gardens, Oak Valley, Enchanted Hill, and many others. It's perhaps best known for the 3 universities housed here, including Tennessee State University, Fisk University, and Meharry Medical College. North Nashville is also home to the Tennessee Titans practice facility. The Tennessee Titans will begin construction on an expansion project at St. Thomas Sports Park, which will almost double its current footprint in Nashville's Metro Center neighborhood. The plan includes 60,000 square feet in additions, including a new building situated along one of the practice fields, and major renovation of spaces within the existing 75,000 square foot building.
Now live from North Nashville, Dr. William Head. Let's talk about it.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk About It in Greater North Nashville, Tennessee, not to be confused with North Little Rock, Arkansas, which is a city unto itself. North Nashville is the largest enclave of African American voters in the city, and we're proud and happy that we're on NorthNashvilleBD.com, where you can find the North Nashville online TV station. Yes, the North Nashville online TV. All you have to do is go to the website, again, North Nashville, B as in boy, D as in David.com, so you can see the oldies but goodies on the TV screen. We've got Bonanza and Batman, and Robin may show up with Batman. We've got lots and lots of shows that you enjoyed long ago that are still relevant today. And we're going to ramp this thing up from here until we both cannot do it any longer. So welcome. I've been out of place for 2 weeks. Life happens. We had a week when we did not do a show at all because of technical difficulties with the mad scientist. He was under the weather, and last week I want to thank Miss Alicia Haddocks, Reverend Alicia Haddocks, the pastor of the Christian Journey Fellowship Church here in Nashville. If you don't have a church home, or if you want to visit a dynamic pastor, proponent of the Christian ethic, go see Reverend Haddock. She is a divine lady of great spirit and great understanding. She will bless your soul. Prayers today for the all the people in the war zone in Eastern Europe, as that thing has been going on for a full year. There's an indication that there have been over 200,000 people killed, 100,000 Russian soldiers, 100,000 soldiers and citizens of the Ukraine killed in what seems to be a war of attrition. The people of the Ukraine refuse to give in, and Putin, who seems to be the hero of the GOP, refuses to come to his senses and stop a war that is making no sense. It's been over 18 months since Mr. Eastep was murdered on I-65. And they tell me, and I read, that no charges were levied against the 9 peace officers who shot this young man 30 times. I am still amazed that there has been no row raised. Haven't heard any justifiably indignant pastors of the gospel speak out in his behalf. So it bothers me. It seems that the faith-based funding from the George Bush era has silenced all of the black religious leadership. Everybody's enjoying the flow of the milk and honey from faith-based funding, and watching their parishioners' civil rights being taken. I don't see any of them stepping out. And of course, if they've given in to the dollar, they can't step out because they're already up to their ears in it. So I'll probably hear from that one. Code Blue, Code Blue. We need the crash cart. We've got to save TSU. Ladies and gentlemen, the attack on Dr. Glover, though I don't agree with everything she does or says, is unwarranted, totally unwarranted. To imagine that a coach who went 11-0 and played in a bowl game is going to be fired because of his or her performance makes no sense whatsoever. Dr. Glover just brought in the largest freshman class in the history, in the over 100-year history of Tennessee State University. Now all of a sudden the state wants to question her viability as president of the university. That is totally ludicrous. Totally. What is her job? Her job is to work and attract students to her university. Well, the enrollment is at an all-time high. What are you going to punish her for? Then you say, well, she is at fault for the lack of capacity for the students that she has, because she has students all over town staying in hotels and motels. Well, let's look at that. The university is owed $544 million. That has occurred over a 60-year period. At most, Dr. Glover has been there for 10 years. So she's responsible for the fact that the capacity of the university has not grown as much as other universities around it. Tennessee Tech, Tennessee Martin, MTSU. MTSU has the largest enrollment in the state now. Well, I wonder why that is. Because they've got enough dormitory rooms for the kids. They have increased all of the fiscal facilities of the university. They have pressed more money into programs. Tennessee State has not received any of that. Now, you're going to give me half of what I need to run the university, then turn around and penalize me because I'm doing better than the universities you want to support. Look at that logic. See if that's logical to you, because it meets no standard of logic that I know of. You're going to penalize the president of the university for doing more with less than anybody in the state. So you're going to take money and penalize her for making it with, even in spite of your theft. And ladies and gentlemen, the $253 million that the state is now investing in the infrastructure of the university has nothing to do with the $544 million that it owes the university. The $544 million that they owe the university is owed because they did not pay the university's land grant fees, or they did not budget money for the university's land grant fees. So over 60 years, they have shorted the university $544 million that could have been utilized to do what? Increase capacity, keep the infrastructure up, make sure that university professors are on the highest level academically, make sure that students had everything they need. $544 million goes a long way. That $253 million is being spent because the campus is a state-owned entity, and they are not meeting the health department's requirements for sewage, heat, light, things that are basic to the university. Roofs are caving in. Professors are putting buckets under leaks in their offices, trying to keep the water off their books and their computers. Now, whose fault is that? Is that Dr. Glover's fault? Please. History says that the state has undersupported and tried to watch the university fall on its face. A couple of months ago, you had a state legislator who questioned Dr. Glover on how she had so many students at Tennessee State. How did you get such a large recruiting class when they had to pass by other universities that the state sponsored because they feel at home at TSU? I am a Fisk graduate, but I have 2 Tennessee State University graduate degrees. I'm challenging every TSU person who might see this to provide $100 toward finding a law firm that will go after the state of Tennessee to get Tennessee State University's $544 million. Of course, that's not going to come in one lump sum. It's going to take time, and they need to put together an amortized schedule as to when they're going to pay and how much they're going to pay. Until then, all federal funding should be taken away from any institution in the state that the state supports. By the way, the Office of Civil Rights of the Department of Education in Washington is a good place for you to send a complaint. Let them investigate. See if they can move this along. I've dealt with them on once as a college administrator, and they are not nice people. They will turn over rocks you didn't even know you had. So it's time somebody takes some action. I've got the first 100 on anybody who wants to get together and put together enough money to hire an out-of-state law firm. Nobody in the state of Tennessee is going to touch it. Don't even think about it. Everybody in the state of Tennessee gets their sustenance from the state of Tennessee. So don't think about anybody in the state unless you know some guy who's an outcast who is angry at the state. You're wasting your time. Wasting your time. The battle of and for Nashville is on and red hot. The Republicans are trying to rename John Lewis Boulevard and add to it 45's name. And they want to cut Nashville's representation in the city council from the, over 40 representatives they have down to 20 by state law. They've gerrymandered the senatorial district so that people from outside of Davidson County are now drawing shall we say, sustenance from Nashville. Now you say, well, that's none of my business. It is when you start wondering where all of the money for infrastructure and everything else goes when it starts leaving the county. Then you think this last tax raise was big. Wait till you find yourself paying taxes for somebody in another county so they can have better roads and leave you with the, of course, we the pothole capital of the state, but at least the state is working on that. So it is imperative that you get out your razors and knives and start cutting this stuff up so that you are not paying the way for people who live outside the metro. Metro is the fastest growing area in the state. Money is coming in north, south, east, and west. People are coming to Nashville. The rest of the state, other than the great state of Memphis, are coming in droves. You need to pay attention. And the great thing about this, it's not a black thing. It's not a white thing. It's a universal thing. This is something we are all in the same tub of cold, nasty water coming from the GOP in the legislature for this state. Nothing more, nothing less. They're mad because the city would not buy into bringing the Republican convention here during the last election cycle. So they're now hitting back and trying to put their fingers into and on everything. Well, meanwhile, today we have as our guest a good friend of mine up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Mr. Ray Scott. Good afternoon, Ray.
Good afternoon, Doctor. It's so good to hear your edification as you speak of the travails that exist in Tennessee. I want you to understand that a lot of those problems cross-pollinate. We have some of those problems here in Michigan. We don't have a Tennessee State. I'm well acquainted with Tennessee State and the young men that they've helped in transport from Philadelphia and New York and Indiana to go to school there and become outstanding representatives of Tennessee State, of that fine university. And these men went on to become just a bastion of support for kids coming through sports. And I gave a talk yesterday, and I just said, the great thing about sports is sports knocks down barricades. And so, that attack is going to come on sports with how they're bringing forward these young men now. Not only that are great athletes, but they're rich. So I'm waiting for that attack to come from the Republican side. I won't say Republicans because I do, in a scantily clad way, do have some Republican friends. But I just see this. I'm waiting. We had a little bit on Fox when they told LeBron to shut up and dribble. I don't forget those messages that you send out. A man that you couldn't stand in his driveway, you couldn't afford to stand in his driveway, you're telling him to shut up and dribble. Maybe you need to learn how to dribble. But be that as it may, as you edified me with what's existing in Tennessee, trust me, my brother, it's happening here too.
Hey, it's the funniest thing is that they're trying to get us back to 1953, and it's 2023. I think that's going to be one heck of a struggle. I pray that it is anyway. I hope that I'm around to be in the struggle. It would be fun to see people back in the street raising sand. I love the protest movement in the 60s. It was, hey, lived it, participated in it. The university I went to was, Tennessee State, Fisk, Meharry, American Baptist College. Students were instrumental in all of that.
Yes.
The public school children, my sister-in-law, who was very deep into the early part of it, said that her mother told her, "You better not go downtown," and she said she got out the door and headed downtown with everybody else.
Yeah.
So it's a tradition. I hope we get it back. We need to start raising sand about being relegated to the bench. Tell them to shut up and try to dribble.
Yeah.
Ray, put Ray's book up there so people can see it. Mr. Scott has written a very interesting book, The NBA in Black and White, the memoirs of a trailblazing NBA player and coach. Ray, the book is so very interesting because a lot of the history that you provide, put Ray back up there, in your book is just something that reminds me of having lived a lot of that time that you're talking about and seen most of those players. In your opinion and in your book, you were very clear that the motives and the operation of the game have changed so drastically.
Yes. And it goes back to something you spoke about earlier, Doctor, and that's about people demanding their rights. And, I'd like to talk about the accomplishments of people that came from that era, because although they were deemed as kind of secondary roles before the Big Four, these men were very important, not only to our standard of being, but our standard of living. And I'm talking about guys the first guy I want to talk about is Earl Francis Lloyd, who went to West Virginia State University. See, people used to say in those days, Doc, and you know this, they used to say in those days, oh, he went to a black school, he can't play. He doesn't know anything about basketball. Yet, one of the first people they drafted was Earl Francis Lloyd by the Washington Bears from West Virginia State University. So then I came to understand, I said, well, let me get into a deep dive here like I did with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, because I wanted to know baseball. I was a kid. I loved baseball. I wanted to know baseball. So I said, I'm going to do the same thing for my guys. I'm going to do a deep dive. I'm going to go back and find out the beginning of this. And in a pejorative sense, what they tried to do was encompass all black people and put us all in the same bathtub. They wanted to make us monolithic.
You people.
I'm sorry?
You people.
You people. You got it. So they tried to do that. But by these men getting their education, I'm talking about from Duquesne, Chuck Cooper, who was an All-American. I'm talking about Earl Francis Lloyd from West Virginia State. And Sweetwater Clifton, that may have gotten the best education of all because he was a Harlem Globetrotter. And he went around the world. Can it get any better than that? So this man traveled the world. But the New York Knickerbockers said he's a fine basketball player. He held his own with our great George Mikan in the World Classic games in Chicago. And we should sign this man. And they did. So the Knicks signed Sweetwater, and the Washington Bears drafted Earl Lloyd, and the Boston Celtics, Arnold Red Auerbach, who actually, of the three guys, he was connected to two of them because Earl Lloyd played for him in Washington as a Washington Bear when Red was the coach there, and Chuck Cooper played for him in Boston. So when he came out of Duquesne, so all that history, I was kind of, whoa, man. And these are the first three cats that went out on the floor that white people saw, quote unquote, playing their sport. You know, kind of like Tiger Woods playing their sport. So, you know, you see these things and you go like, wait a minute, history does repeat itself. Because the one thing that the American public has an eye for is excellence.
And
talent,
winners.
artistry, brains. They like that combination. So I saw these men come about. And then they say, well, this is so good. These guys are good. How will we do with Bill Russell from San Francisco? How will we do with Wilt Chamberlain from Kansas? How will we do with Oscar Robertson from Cincinnati? How will we do with Elgin Baylor from Seattle?
Seattle, yeah.
You know, these kids went to white schools. And look at how good they are. You know, don't you think they're casting some light upon us as learning universities? And that's certainly true. And so those four men, in my opinion, were responsible for building the NBA because of what their impact was with their talent, with their brains, with their style. You know, it was, and I just said, my goodness, man, this is like a wow. And all of a sudden, in 1958, when you had Willie Knowles out in California at UCLA playing for John Wooden and Walter Torrance at UCLA. And then all of a sudden at USC across the street, you had the great, was it Willie Wood playing quarterback? A position that was clearly defined by the white athlete. We had no use for black quarterbacks. Oh, they were faster and more athletic and could throw the ball as well. We didn't have a use for them. And so now as I sit around and search this, look at the present and go back to the history, you know, it's like, America, what took you so long? You had these kids here forever. You know, you had Deacon Dan Tower. You know, you had Deacon Jones. You had Lamar Lundy. You had Rosie Taylor, Rosie Greer.
Yeah.
You know, you had these great people, and you would let them walk around before you'd have them entertain and make your city a bastion of athletic excellence. So in researching all of these things, when I went to my book, I said, man, I gotta write this stuff down. I gotta talk about guys that people don't know about, because think about how great they must have been to even be talked about. They were all Americans, but they weren't all pros because they couldn't get to the pros. So in my book, I try to let people know not only about the Chamberlains and the Russells, the guys they brought forward, but I wanted them to know about these kids that opened those doors and showed that intelligence and showed that skill. And that's what's in my book. My book is my heart and soul of what I observed in my life. And I made it a parallel, Reverend Doctor. I made it a parallel. I know I probably hitting some other things there, but I made it a parallel because you and I come out of the 60s. And when we come out of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, you can't say John Fitzgerald Kennedy without saying Emmett Till, without saying Medgar Evers, without saying Malcolm X, without saying Dr. King and Rosa Parks. All of these people, again, African-American people, of great intellect, of broad community involvement. And you don't want me to talk about them? Well, my book may not be for you if you don't want me to speak of them. Because there's no way that I could not, if I'm going to observe excellence and integrity and people of stalwart character, There's just no way. And that brings me to something I know you would enjoy when I research it, was J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah.
You know, those types of things that were done and put out about us.
In
And
an
yet
effort to
you would-
in an effort to discredit us.
That's correct. It was not to bring credit.
No.
And it was not to absolve and forgive and love. It wasn't any of those adjectives. You know, it was quite an unusual time for a kid my age to come through in the 60s and 70s. And it all turned on a dime. And as we all know, after when LBJ died, that was one of the greatest holidays they had, because that's when they went to the deck in Tennessee and Michigan and Pennsylvania and California and said, we're going to try to roll all this stuff back that we can.
Mm.
We're going to roll it back. And sports has kept fighting. Sports has been on the front pages of fighting that setback that you want to take us back to. And we're just saying we're not going.
They ain't going back.
We've
not
knocked those
returning.
barriers back down. Yes.
Ray, you something that's maybe a little far afield, but thing that you explained to me, when Wilt came out of high school in Pennsylvania, a tall, skinny kid, 6'10" kid, came out the next year.
Yes.
And none of the 5 universities in Philly recruited either one of them, Wilt
Yes.
nor you. Tell us
Yes.
about that wonderful time of year.
Well, you know, it's knowing Philadelphia, and again, in research, I didn't know all of this right off the top of my head, but in research, what I found out, Doctor, is that Philadelphia is a Catholic town. And say, well, Ray, what do you mean by that? Well, there's 3 out of the 5 colleges within the borders of Philadelphia are Catholic schools. So where do your leaders come from? You know, we talk about Catholicism in idyllic terms, but if you want to see watch Philadelphia, go look at Philadelphia. 3 Catholic schools and Temple and Penn, called the Big 5. When I graduated from school, now, and I'm going to share this with you because I came upon it in my research. When I came out of school, of West Philadelphia High School, and I had gone to Catholic school from 5th grade to 9th grade or 10th grade, then I transferred out to public school because I wanted to be with my friends. But the strange thing was, with those 5 universities there, one's an Ivy League school. I knew academically that was for academic excellence. So I took my name off the list there. But University of Temple, who had 2 African Americans, Guy Rogers and Hal Lear. St. Joe's had no African Americans. LaSalle, with the great Tom Gola, they recruited our great Jackie Moore. Jackie wasn't eligible after 1 year. He was gone. And Villanova. And I wanted to go to Villanova. And I took a ride out to Villanova with a friend to apply. See if, you would extend the scholarship to me. So I did this myself. I sat in the office, and the pastor, the priest said to me, "We don't think, looking at your transcript, you can do the work here." And it broke my heart. And so I went up to New York because I graduated in mid-year, January. Went to New York, entered community college, Brooklyn Tech, City Tech. Went to school in Brooklyn. And then the next year I went to University of Oregon Catholic School in Oregon. And they are schools affiliated with Notre Dame. So I was happy to be there. My mother was happy for me to be there. And when the coach came to my house to do it for his recruiting trip, I mean, the guy in my living room was like Sammy Davis Jr. He had everybody laughing and just tickled to death and talking about the greatness of the Notre Dame school that rolled over to our campus because a lot of the priests that retired came to Portland. And so I knew, and I'd been affiliated enough with the Catholics in Philadelphia, it said, keep your eyes open. because you came out of a city with 5 universities and not one recruited you. But I also knew it didn't hurt my feelings only because the 7-foot guy from Overbrook High School also was from Philadelphia, and he went to Kansas.
His name was
Now-
Chamberlain, wasn't it?
And his name was Chamberlain. Now, anytime you let a commodity in your city that's grown up in your city excel in your schools, good academic student, it seems to me you'd have said, let's make a deal. Let's give all of his family scholarships to our big 5 schools, and you just pick one of these schools you want to go to. It seems to me you could have done that. They didn't play let's make a deal with Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain wound up going to Kansas with Fog Allen. And a school in an area that was not totally integrated. So think of what Wilt went to in Kansas. So when I wound up in Oregon with the Catholic priest, and Wilt was out there in Kansas, then 2 more, Wayne Hightower, who was in a class after me, he went to Kansas.
Is Wayne
And
from
then
Philly?
Wayne's from Philly.
No
He was
kidding.
in the class after me. Yeah, I had to beat his class. I played against Wayne and Wilt.
Wow.
I was in between them.
Wayne
And-
was a big guy.
He was
Also,
6'10", quick
yes,
as
sir.
a cat, and smooth as the other side of the pillow. I mean, he was just a cool guy. I had a lot of affection for him. We were hangout buddies for a long time. But looking at Philadelphia, that topography, and saying, wow, they didn't pick these guys as Philly? So when I tell you that there was a problem, I'm not only going to tell you there's a problem, I'm going to show you who they had a problem with. Because all those guys left town. And it wasn't until George Raveling, the famous coach, went to Villanova. 2 or 3 years after me, he went to Villanova. And George Raveling said to the coach at Villanova, what are y'all doing? You're letting all these kids from the public league get out of our game. This is like Bear Bryant talking about Alabama. How y'all letting all these guys get out of Alabama and come back and beat us? And they're from Alabama.
Exactly.
This is absurd. That is the Bear. So George Raveling said the same thing to Coach Kraft. So they recruited Wally Jones. They recruited Hubie White. And so that it started there. Then they recruited the kids out of Washington, D.C., Tom Hoover, who was an All-American, and Archbishop Malloy. So they began to interact and do those types of things, Doc. But it was a strange area to exist in because it was duplicitous. They had us on one side. We weren't thinking that as kids. And the white players on the other side. And so they would get to be All-Americans, and they would get to play for Villanova, LaSalle, Temple, and they were All-Americans. And lo and behold, guys that we knew that we were as good as, they're in the NBA. Because the NBA is an All-American league. So when you're drafted into the NBA, you're drafted because you're an All-American and because that city has an identification with you through the fact that you may have been an All-American, you're All-Conference or whatever, and you would be drafted into the NBA. Well, lo and behold, the three horsemen changed that. And when they changed it, and then along comes Don Barksdale and Dave Miner, great Hank Dezzoni signs a contract, Harold Hunter comes into the league. They're only there briefly, but they made an impact in my mind of how good the players were. So after a while, it was like, we're not so stupid, are we? We're not such terrible basketball players. We do know the game. And so that was the pronouncement that I was making in my memoir, that this thing turned, and it turned slowly, but it turned. And when the Big Four got there, they were superstars because they made the people who sit at home and listen on the radio and read the newspapers, they made people want to come to the games. Because the only way you knew about basketball in those days was to be a spectator. There was no television. So the people that were spectating the sport and seeing these marvelous athletes, these great people, these smart people, man, they couldn't wait. They filled the stands. They filled the stands. And to me, that is the greatest part, Doctor, of my heritage, is what those guys gave me. Because they gave me a player, and I was not a superstar, but I was a player that filled a role, that they gave a player like myself the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Because they were so good, and they were such great gentlemen. And so one of my biggest thrills is when I went to Kansas City to play in the tournament that Tennessee was winning every year.
Tennessee State, yeah.
And, that's right. I went to, and they brought me into the locker room. I had a friend on the team named Nerlin Turner, and Nerlin brought me from Brooklyn. He brought me into the locker room, and I met Skull Barnett.
Skull Barnett.
Yeah, and I met Johnny Barnhill, who was my lifelong friend. He became my lifelong friend. And I met Diamond Jim Satterwhite. And I'm in this locker room with these guys, and I'm going like, man, you guys are, with what we're looking at now, you guys are on the rise. And they would play professional basketball and play it extremely well. And Coach McClendon, legend. And this man, this is in the 50s, and nobody even knows his name.
You know
it's sad what we miss out on. The people that we miss out on with our hierarchical racism.
Absolutely.
You should mention you can't mention John, and I love John Wooden, but you can't mention John Wooden and not mention Johnny McClendon.
That they are two of the three coaches who have won back-to-back national championships. Tennessee State did it, UCLA did it, and Kentucky State University did it.
Yes, sir.
And you just brought in some things about TSU that I'm glad you did, because I was on the way up to asking you about the people you mentioned in the book from Tennessee. I appreciate that. Would you believe that John McClendon is in the Basketball Hall of Fame as a contributor, but not as a coach?
Yes.
That is ludicrous.
Yeah, as is Earl Lloyd. You know, don't put men in just to say, "Oh, we forgot, but we'll give you a little slice." You know, we'll give you a contributorship. Either they're Hall of Famers or they're not, and we all know they are. I know the people that are watching your program today know that these gentlemen are Hall of Famers. You know, and you mentioned Earl Lloyd in the same breath as Jackie Robinson, and he's in the Hall of Fame as a contributor. Are you kidding me? You know, he took the same risk Jackie Robinson did.
Absolutely.
And he made the team. And people don't know, let me share some information. Earl Lloyd is the first African American to put one of those championship rings on. When they talk about the championship rings, well, let's talk about it. Earl Lloyd and Jim Tucker. Jim Tucker from Kentucky, who was one of the Iron Dukes up at Duquesne with the Ricketts brothers and Cy Hugo Green and Fletcher Johnson. He was there. Jim Tucker got the ring with the Syracuse Nationals, and Earl Lloyd. And Earl Lloyd was a starter opposite side of the floor of the great Dow Shades. So they won a championship. Earl Lloyd's a Hall of Fame. But
right.
I'm glad you made that point, that they have contributorship status when they should have true Hall of Fame status.
Absolutely.
I don't disagree at all.
My late good friend Ben Job rode that horse into the ground. He would not accept a nomination to the Basketball Hall of Fame until McClendon was moved in as a coach. And at this moment, I'm not sure that he has been recognized as a coach, even though the former great coach at the University of North Carolina admitted that he got the Four Corners offense from McClendon.
That's right. That's right.
So
That's right.
now, got about 15 minutes, and let's talk about as a young man like I am. Let's talk about your top 10 greatest NBA players.
Well, that's a good analogy to ask of, because in my opinion, Doc, you can only be as great as you are in your era.
Right.
So if you want to compare Michael Jordan to Wilt Chamberlain, I laugh. Can't be done. Michael Jordan, it's like talking. I had a guy ask me a question one time. He said, if Muhammad Ali, that's your number one guy, fought your number two guy, Joe Louis, who would win? And I said, my friend, let me look you squarely in the eye and tell you this. We'll never know.
Never know. Never will.
We'll never know. You can only be great in your era.
Hey.
So the era that I played in, and I played in my opinion, the Cinderella era. Because when the brothers, they started sending so many bad brothers to the basketball court, it got to be phenomenal. But in my era, when you talk about the 10 guys, and these are the 10 guys. See, I always say, when they say, who are the 10 guys? I'm going, you mean the 10 guys that I saw walk through the door and I'm quaking in my boots? They said, yeah. I said, okay, number one is Wilt Norman Chamberlain, because I was 14 years old when I met him. And from 14 years old until today, he's still a nightmare. And he died.
And he's still a nightmare.
He's still a nightmare. So Wilt Chamberlain clearly is number one. And you can compare all of it. He's got 72 records that are still alive in the NBA. He's had 65 points or more than anybody. He's had 70 points more than anyone. He's had 100 points
and
more
nobody
than
got
anyone.
there yet.
And he is the only one. He averaged 50 points a game. But they came out to, and I called it a distraction. They said, well, what about Kareem? And I love Kareem. Make no mistake, I love Kareem. But I'm a big man. A big man is counted upon to do what? Get possessions for his team. He's a tall guy. You're closest to the basket. Get the ball for us. Correct? Okay. If you agree with that, Doc, then think of this. Wilt Chamberlain, in 13 years, grabbed 24,000 rebounds.
24,000 rebounds.
24,000 rebounds. Number two is Bill Russell. He grabbed, I think, 22 to 23,000. Kareem is I think he is at 17,000 in 20 years.
Okay.
Russell and Wilt played 13 years. 22, 24.
Wow.
Wilt's got the most. So the most valuable player to me is a guy that gets me the ball. And Wilt gets you the ball. He gets you possessions. That's why Dennis Rodman was so valuable, because Dennis Rodman got you extra possessions.
Played great defense.
And, oh my gosh, he was a shutdown guy. No doubt about it. So there's Wilt, there's Russell. Third is the O.
Big O.
And I got the O and I got Elgin. I didn't guard the O, I guarded Elgin. So maybe I should have Elgin, but because Elgin lit me on fire. And but Elgin, number two would be
Number
3,
4.
and Oscar would be 4. And then there's a case to be made as number 5, because I did play against him. There's a case to be made for Kareem.
Okay.
And I'm going to have to sneak one guy in because he was a fire all by himself. I'm going to have to sneak one guy in from that era. The guy's name is Willis Reed.
Yeah.
And Willis Reed, to me, and these are the big guys with Oscar and Elgin, but these are the big guys. I never met a man on the basketball floor with more heart than Willis Reed.
Hmm.
And I kind of didn't want to put him in because he wasn't elite, but he was. He wasn't the toughest, but he was. He wasn't the greatest offensive guy, but he was. That means you can make an argument. So just for argument's sake, he belongs there. So that's
Okay.
number 5. And then the guy that I saw that really, and I played with, was Earl of Pearl.
Mm.
So I got Earl, and then I have to go to the magician that I played with for 1 year in Virginia, which was Dr. J, Julius.
Right.
And so Julius makes 6 or 7. 6?
Yeah, well, he's 8.
8. Oh my goodness! So I only got 2 left, and the 2 I gotta, that I.
Well,
played against,
you had a tie between
Elgin.
Jabbar and Willis.
Well, there's a couple of ties. If I'm ranking them, there's guys that were so good at that level that they have. That's what I'm saying. They have to be in the conversation. And but there were guys like that. And remember, I'm leaving out the Caucasian players.
Okay.
I'm just talking about the African American guys.
Okay.
Because the African American guys had a different hand dealt to him. They weren't dealt the platforms of the Kuzis and the Pettits and the Arizons, and who were great players. They were great players, but they had a platform. When they came out of Mississippi or Holy Cross or wherever they came from, they came with a platform as All-Americans. They were designated. As we all know, Russell and Russell wasn't designated a great player because Russell was traded before he ever got to play a game.
Mm.
He was traded from St. Louis to the Boston Celtics.
I'm sure he went from 2 fairly racist places from one to the other.
Yeah, well,
Some very racist places.
Yes. I mean, he does not live in Boston. You know that he didn't die in Boston. He died in Oregon, and he lived in the Carolinas, and he lived in Washington State. But when they tore his house up, he never felt the same about Boston.
Why would you when you come home and the wall is smeared with feces?
Definitely, yes. That's terrible.
And your bed has a pile of feces in it.
Yeah. So Boston put that on themselves. The real folks of Boston. And you said 10, and I'm lacking 2.
You got 2 more.
Yeah, I'm Earl, and personally, this is a personal choice because I played with him, was Dave Bing.
Okay.
David he's got to be in my top 10 because I played with Dave and Earl. And my 10th guy, and it's going to surprise a lot of people, but I think he's the most non-talked about superstar in the history of the game. And his name is Gus Honeycomb Johnson.
Honeycomb Johnson.
Now, you know what he brought to the game? And people don't remember this.
He brought some power to the game.
And you know what he brought with that power? The Showtime dunking.
Yep.
He was the first. The Wilt dunk, Russell dunk, and there were a few other dunks. Johnny Green dunk. There were a few dunks here and there. Gus Johnson, every night he saw that floor. You might as well get back there and get ready because he's coming.
Hey, and
we'll
go right over your head to do it.
Jump over your head. Jump over your head. He was the original Slammer Jammer.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
sir.
So, but those 10 guys, in my career. And like I say, it's debatable. I will debate with you in that realm because there's some bad men there. There's some bad, but if you talk about the four, what's the thing out in Dakotas, the wall?
Just thought of it with the presidents on it.
Yeah, the four presidents.
Yeah,
I forget. I maybe Seth can help us because we're a couple old. We're about to live with those guys.
Too much in the computer. Got to go too deep.
But I always see them.
Rushmore.
Yeah. The Mikan, Russell, Wilt, Kareem.
Mikan was the top big guy.
Mikan was the first.
Oh, okay.
So you always have to give. You know, that's the way the league was.
Okay.
But he came out of DePaul, and Ray Meyer taught him how to hook shot and all that stuff because he was 6'10". But he had him change the rules because he took him from the 3-second lane. You got to get out of the lane in 3 seconds. If you let Micah stay in the lane, he'd score 100 every night. This was no something. You know, 6'10", 250. So that was Micah. Then I said, Wilt, that's foregone. That's foregone with what Wilt accomplished. Russell, that's foregone because it's what he accomplished. But Wilt and Russell forced them to widen the lane. They wouldn't lift the baskets, but they widened the lane. They put you further. They thought they would hurt them, putting them further away from the basket. That's a big joke.
That's when the big guy got the fadeaway jumper.
That's right. He went with the Globetrotters and came back with the fadeaway. And then the fourth guy is Kareem. Because Kareem took all of what the other three had done and put it into a finesse game. A beautiful finesse game. And in fact, for Pivot Man, it was some things they used to say about Mikan, and I would say you teach the same things that Kareem did. Kids should learn. I watch games and I don't see anybody learning how to shoot hook shots, and it saddens me because it's one of the most beautiful shots in the game. But Kareem and Bob Lanier mastered it.
But you know why Kareem developed the hook shot when he came out of high school. The NCAA or the college basketball rules committee outlawed the dunk.
Yeah, that's totally ridiculous.
Well,
yeah, but they put it back in for Ralph Sampson, so they did do something right about that. But when I look at those guys, and then look at the kids that came after them and the highly skilled kids, those are the guys, those 10, 11 guys are the people that I compare all of them to. Because with Elgin, here comes Connie, here comes Mike. I didn't play against Mike, but I certainly watched him. Here comes, and then Julius. High flyers all. Now, that doesn't mean that Clyde Drexler wasn't a high flyer, or that Charles Barkley wasn't a high flyer. But they encompass so much of what the guys that I talked about in my 10 did.
Okay.
And the guys in my 10 were basically originators. Because remember, the guys in my 10, the guys you asked me about, Doc, remember, people said they couldn't play because they were black. That's what people, you heard it in Tennessee. I heard it in Philadelphia, loud and clear. He went to a black school.
The proof of the pudding was the 1966 NCAA championship game between Texas Western and the University of Kentucky. Kentucky had 3 All-Americans. Texas Western, who are they? Matter of fact, I was sitting in the student union at Fisk University, freshmen looking at this game, and they introduced Kentucky, and you had Pat Riley and all that bunch. And they started introducing kids from Texas Western. They introduced one black kid, a second, a third, a fourth, and somebody said, "Is Texas Western a black school?" Not quite.
Not quite.
When they introduced the fifth one, everybody said, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
gonna be earth shattering,"
Earth-shattering.
because we all knew that having three black kids on the floor at the same time at predominantly white institutions was just about messing with the quota. So to have five out there, it became a draw everybody in the world to this thing. That was first just completely. It dominated the TV watching that night, all
right.
over the country.
Yeah. Well, the coach, Don did a heck of a job, because if you watch the movie, you knew he didn't want to start five. But he said, "This is what I'm up against. I'm up against the best school in the nation. And I got these kids I know can play."
Absolutely.
And he put those kids on the floor. And that was probably the greatest entertainment of the 60s. With the revolution that was going on in the 60s, how fitting that contest took place on television.
For everybody
Remember?
to see.
That's right, because everybody didn't see UCLA when they won theirs in a row. Nobody saw Hazard and Goodrich and Keith and Fritz Slaughter. Nope, because Wooden started three. He started three African Americans. And so Coach Wooden, I don't know how deft he is or how he reached out of Los Angeles, California, into Harlem, New York, and plucked out Kareem. Some funny things.
You see that, Ray?
I hear the rustle of your money.
hey, money talks and everything else walks.
Everything else walks, yeah. And that kid went from Harlem to California, and look
in
at
a time when a long distance call cost you $3.50 even before you start talking.
That's right. And I know they paid a lot of 350s too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But it was to see that part of history in the 60s as I'm growing up, and in my parallel universe of the Kennedys and the people that were assassinated. I always have to mention, and I do. I really, and I'm not being diligent. I have to mention a lady from Detroit. A white lady from Detroit was killed in Mississippi, assassinated by the Klan because she was driving enrollers for voting from, I forget the town, Gulfport to some city, and they caught them out on the road and they murdered her. Viola
Liuso, yes.
Yeah, and her daughter now lives in Tennessee.
Does
and
she?
I'm friends with her daughter, with Peggy, yeah.
Oh man, I need her telephone number. You tell her you got my number. Give it to her.
Yes, I'll find a way to get you connected. I'm really going to do that. She is a wonderful lady. She talks about being in school. My mother left us in school for my father to take us to school. She said, I just had to do something with what was going on in the South, and she drove to the South and gave her life. And I just always want that story to be told, because she's somebody that's in my, you lived in Pontiac. She's someone in Detroit that was like me coming to Detroit and hearing about her and what she did. It just took my breath away. What courage. What courage.
And knowing full well she was walking into the lion's mouth.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So I always try to mention her when I talk about the 60s. That's how big the 60s were. But I was blessed because I got to know, I was here with the rise of Motown. I was here with the rise of Aretha Franklin. I was here and out there with the rise of Muhammad Ali. And a lot of people don't remember, Muhammad Ali was not popular.
No.
When he was Cassius Clay, he was not popular. But he was smart because he studied the game. And his game was to be a Gorgeous George.
Yes, he was.
And then everybody hated me. He said, you know what? Everybody in the stadium is booing Gorgeous George. Everybody in the stadium is booing me.
Who does he
But you know
think
what?
they are? Who does he think he is?
And he
Talking
said,
all
but
that
you know
smack.
what? Everybody is in a seat.
Yes, sir.
Everybody's in a seat.
Every
what I'm
seat's
doing.
got a
I'm
butt in
selling
it.
seats. That's right.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
And that was the guy that came up with that. Well, actually, it was Gorgeous George, because he went to see him in Kentucky, and he said, "This is what I'm going to. I'm going to talk smack. I'm going to talk about people." And it was only, this what they call in New York shtick. It was only an act, but it sold for him. And I saw that kid fight in Chicago when he was a prize fighter. There's very few people that you can say are better than what you saw Muhammad Ali do at 200 pounds.
Hey, he was amazing. His hand speed was immeasurable.
Off the table. Off the table.
My favorite fight he had with Cleveland Williams, I think his name was.
Yes.
And
yeah,
Cleveland would not call him Muhammad Ali, and he.
No, that was Ernie Terrell.
Was it? You sure?
Ernie Terrell.
We're gonna have to argue on that one.
I just read the book. Ernie Terrell. I'm writing a book on boxing. I just researched it. It was Ernie Terrell.
Okay.
And Floyd Patterson. They each called him Cassius.
Yeah.
Joe called him that, but Joe really respected him, and he hurt Joe's feelings.
Yeah,
But
he did.
Muhammad
He talked bad
Ali,
about Joe.
Yeah, he talked bad about Joe. And he really didn't mean it. It's in my book that he apologized. And Joe, he apologized to Marvis, and Joe said to Marvis, it'll never mean anything. His apology will never mean anything to me until he does it to my face. And Ali did apologize to his face. Yes, Ali was not. He was one of the best guys, one of the best people I ever met in my whole life. And that's in my book. But I had the benefit of being in Detroit, being with these people, the Four Tops and the Temptations. It's just the Supremes and the Vandellas. It was just great living here because all of these people went to the markets, they went to the store, they went to the dry cleaners, and I got to be with them. So I'm very happy I got to put that in the book. But the Liuzos and the Motown, when I referred to Motown, Doc, I could only say, and then there's Motown.
Yes, sir.
And if you don't know what I mean, then that's shame on you.
That's your problem. It ain't yours.
That's your problem.
Ray, we're gonna have to cut this off right here. We're gonna have to get the Ray Scott Show on the network. Your grasp of history is to be lauded and distributed broadly. We may have to do a Ray Scott Show for sure.
Well, I'm only a phone call away, Doc. You know that. All you got to do is call me, and I'm there.
All right, Ray. Thank you so much for being with us again, and we hope that we do this really again soon.
Oh, well, I really hope so, and thank you, Doc. Thank you, guys, and thank you, Sid.
God bless and keep.
Great producer.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the latest edition of Let's Talk About It. We are now about to close. I would say to you, if you are a Nashvilleian, if you live in Metro, you've got a battle ahead of you. If you are a Tennessee State grad, if you are a Tennessee State student, you've got a battle ahead of you. The governor and his henchmen in the assembly are doing everything they can to discredit Tennessee State University so that they don't have to pay that $544 million. Don't let them do it. You've got to wake up and act out. Make some good trouble, as Mr. John Lewis used to say. Good trouble. Make them put them out there in the public eye. Let them know that you're not going to take it. Well, after a really good show, it's hard for me to say goodbye. But as the late Reverend Dr. Dale P. Andrews, formerly the Dean of Homiletics in the School of Divinity at Vanderbilt University, would say, I have more questions than answers, more problems than solutions. Of these, I freely share. But the Reverend Joanne Robertson, who has none of those titles and positions, says, keep the faith. Keep your faith in God. Even though you can't stand what's going on. Goodbye. This has been Let's Talk About It. I'm your humble host, William Head.